then because the prophecy states that one of us must guard over the planet at all times, I go to bed and he'll draw stuff. And then I get to wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, wow, look at this. And there's all these cool drawings. And usually he's, just as I'm heading to work, he's now going to bed.
Welcome to the Red Caps Podcast, a podcast where we dip our caps into the blood of our listeners and we ramble on about old school games. Today I am sitting down with a dynamic duo in Tim Molloy and Chris Willett, who are combining Tim's art and Chris's writing into an RPG product called Painted Wastelands, and it's coming to Kickstarter very soon. During this talk, we get to hear about this amazing, strange, twisted, hilarious, but very personal and deep world that Tim has created and that Chris is trying to form into a RPG product that we can all explore and live through that world together as well. So, as always, I hope you can sit back, listen, and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined by Chris and Tim, the creative duo that are about to bring a new book to Kickstarter called The Painted Wastelands. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Before we get into who you guys are and everything else, let's first get an idea of what the Kickstarter is. So tell me what the elevator pitch is, what the overall vibe of it is. The cover art or the intro art on the Kickstarter page has like an acid trip kind of vibe to it. It's really, really crazy looking. But then I went and looked through the preview that's available on drive-thru and got a little sense of it that way. But how about you guys tell me in your guys' words what it is?
Sure. So the Painted Wastelands begins with me reaching out to Tim. I saw his artwork, thought, man, this is so interesting. Wouldn't it be cool to actually partner with an artist where we make the adventure together? My idea was, Tim, you've drawn all these drawings. I've seen them on Instagram. We could take some of these old drawings and I could simply make a little story out of them and we could just put them together. We'll stitch together that way. And that was my pitch to him. He said to me, oh, well, actually, it all exists in a world already. There's already this world that I've been writing in and making comics, making all this artwork. Like everything exists in a world. He had a D&D setting that already existed in his mind. As he started to tell me more about it, I thought to myself, this could very well be an RPG setting. So what we ended up doing is together sort of taking everything that he put together about the Painted Wastelands. It's just a tiny little corner of a much larger world. We focused in on that little corner and created a hex crawl out of it. So this hex crawl has 35 different hexes, different encounters. Some of them are just was Tim just saying, what about this kind of crazy idea? What if there was a canyon and there's a spaceship trapped inside the canyon? It's getting sucked in by a vortex of nothingness. And he's like, well, that's probably too complicated. You probably couldn't do it. And I was like, oh, no, I think we are going to do it. And then I sat down and calculated how and figured it out and wrote it all up into a whole dungeon where these sky ghouls are trapped, getting sucked into the void. So everything is sort of pulled in from his world. Working with Tim was a lot kind of like working with George Lucas, where you're like, hey, Tim, I take
that as a compliment.
Yeah, it is a compliment. It's like, hey, what are these people drinking? And he's like, oh, they drink blue milk. What? Yeah, they all drink blue milk. They always have. What else would they drink? So the world is based on his ideas. What I did simply is try to make it into something that's usable on the game table as a hex crawl with classes. There's 2 classes. There's a bunch of monsters, new magic items, things like that. Tim, do you want to talk about your world?
Yeah. So, it starts with the DM about the game. Do you want to do this? I'd been thinking that it'd be really, really good to do a tabletop role-playing game based on my work this year. That was a little thing I was thinking about, and so immediately I get a DM. Upon receiving the DM, I'm already very interested in having a look at Chris had done before, and what he was sort of pitching to me. But yeah, the work is something that I've been doing. Like the world is something I've been working on since I was in my late teens. So it's 25 years worth of comics and paintings and stories and everything. It's a world that is heavily drenched in like surrealism and weirdness. It's a dream dimension, but it's also like a real place that people live and people go there. It's filled with necromancy and decaying technology and body horror and lots of humor and weirdness and strangeness. And it's a large place. Mostly I've been focusing on the adventures of a particular necromancer called Mr. Unpronounceable, who has lurched his way up and down my imaginary kind of map in my brain for 25 years. But he's one character who's existed in this world, and it's really exciting to sort of, I don't know, like to just double down and triple down and quadruple down on like the world building, especially in like a little part of my imaginary world, which wasn't already all set in stone,
Mhm.
aka the painted wastelands.
So a lot of this was driven from Tim, from your art from the get-go, which when I started looking through some of the work you've done, it's all amazing. And I was looking through it and I'm like, I've seen this art style before. And I'm a terrible person at ever going and looking at credits in books. And as I was looking at it, I was like, wait a minute, no, I gotta go check. So I came into my office here and I reached over and I grabbed this and I went, that is exactly what I was looking at. And for those who can't see because it's audio, I just picked up the first copy of Knock. And yeah, the art style, I was like, that's exactly where I've seen this style before. So you've worked on Knock before.
I did the cover for number 2 as well.
Which is also here.
Which is funny. Those guys are great. That was my first foray into doing anything for role-playing games. I used to play role-playing games when I was a lot younger, but it's getting back into it, and a lot of it was I loved the art,
Mm-hmm.
So it's crazy for me, like well, not crazy, I suppose it's just a normal thing to do, but coming back sort of full circle and working in a sort of genre and sort of style and medium, I suppose, that was initially something that was very inspiring. But the Knock guys are great. Mushmen. Yep,
Mary Mushman. And Chris, you've got some other stuff. This isn't your first rodeo as far as tabletop RPG stuff. You've got the Ancient Greece zines out and the Ziggurat of the Blood God, which, as I look at these, there's that meme that has been going around for ages on social media about how often men think about the ancient Roman Empire. You're obviously very thinking about the Greeks quite a bit.
That's true. You're right. So what happened was I wrote these zines because I always wanted to write, RPG books. And originally the ancient Greek idea, adventure campaign setting was going to be a whole book. My partner at the time, we came up with the idea over at Sharktopus Games. We came up with the idea of doing zines instead, just publish them piecemeal. And while that was very satisfying, what I really wanted was a hard case book on the shelf, like a whole book, beautiful artwork. The zines were, when you get into that self-publishing world, you end up finding creative ways to solve problems. Like art is expensive. And so rather than, working with an artist, I just drew the pictures myself. They're fine. But Painted Wastelands was my desire to do a book, like an actual book. Working with Tim is a lot of fun because I think writing is a very solitary endeavor. You kind of sit by yourself in a room without distractions, and you write, and you put it out there on the internet and hope that people respond to it. So you have to have like a partner that you can talk to and bounce ideas off of. And so that's what I enjoy about working with Tim is a lot of times I'll have an idea and I'll say like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this idea? And he's like, that's pretty good, but what about this? And then I'm like, oh man, I hadn't even thought about that.
And then you'll add something, and I'll go, okay, that's canon now.
Mhm.
And it's taken actually a lot of, had you asked me prior to meeting Chris and prior to doing all this work, do you want to hand over like a lot of your creative kind of voice and reins to like a stranger that you've just met? And I would have said no, not at all. But I don't know, like something about Chris's pitch, and I just felt like it got my stuff, my world immediately. Like it isn't just there are wrinkles to it all that I think are quite obtuse.
Mhm.
As a writer, like I like an unreliable narrator. I like a lot of room for interpretation. Of course, you can't do too much of that within a game setting. Like that's the thing that I could never do. So Chris has sort of brought all of this out, and sort of solidified things. And yeah, it's been like super fun for me, and like not sort of scary or weird, or I don't feel jealous when
Yeah, there's
Chris is playing with my brain juice.
well, there's a gentleman that I interviewed not too long before this one, and he's ran a D&D campaign for 45 years now, I think.
Wow.
And 45 or 47 years. I have to go back and look at my notes. And all within the same world. And he's had other people come in and run games in his world. And I've got to think that's kind of probably a similar vibe of something that he's so deeply invested in, and he's spent all this time building up the lore to then go, okay, you can go and play in my sandbox and run stuff and make it new canon and make it new realities of what's happening. It's probably very similar to how that first thought of it probably is for you, Tim, and then watching it work out is got to be a relief.
Yeah.
So
it's gratifying.
So I have an example of our work pattern, which is that in Tim's world, there's a band called Silent Monk, who is one of the most popular bands. It's a nightmare metal band. And I'm like, cool. And we had talked about the idea of a band playing a concert inside of the dungeon. And like you just open the door and it's an entire concert and you're just like, why is this happening in the middle of our dungeon? And I said, yeah, we could have Silent Monk playing in the dungeon. He says, oh, well, actually, Silent Monk is trapped inside of like a time bubble where they're on another planet playing the theme song to a TV show for all eternity. And I'm just like, okay, well.
The perpetual theme to Hasteron's Dilemma.
Yes, it's a theme to a television show called Hasteron's Dilemma, which is also a very popular show. So I sat here like, okay, well, what are we going to do then? How do we tie this in? And we sat there for a while, and then one of us came up with the idea of a cover band is playing the song. So it's a Silent Monk cover band called Squelching Mollusk. I don't remember who came up with Squelching Mollusk, if that was me or him. But just the idea of like this really crummy cover band nobody really likes, but that's who you run into. And there's a whole group of people. There's a mosh pit you get trapped in. There's band merch that you can buy that's mostly worthless because nobody wants it. So just a bunch of like, it's a little bit absurd than your normal, like there's orcs protecting, a chest or something.
I think it is in the decaying and moldering ruins of some forgotten, kingdom that you stumble across the scene. Like you're there for a normal reason, I suppose. But
you're there for a normal reason. They're there because this is the gig.
And this is the Painted Wastelands. People are like I feel like a lot of the time, one of the things that people, one of the best compliments that I get about my work from people, I feel, is that it feels like a lived-in world. And I think that's because I've been living in it in my imagination for 25 years, and I feel like that's totally one of the things that Chris has been really good at, like kind of capturing with the writing, and on top of that, the illustrations. I think together, like it gives that vibe.
So I'm curious. So you've been living with this world in your imagination for 25 years, you've been saying. So a quarter of a century. These locations and characters, what have you, have been bouncing around and and growing and forming it into some sort of a cohesive unit. What was, as you were doing it, what was the primary medium you were looking for? Was it just as an outlet for you for illustration, or was it a comic, or was the goal to write novels in there? What was kind of the medium that you were hoping before you found Chris and he married it with gaming? What was kind of the medium you were going for with it?
Well, I mean, comics, I suppose. Like I've done mostly. There was a large period of my life where that's really all I was doing. I've probably got about 650 pages of like published comics through a small press in Australia, but they managed to permeate throughout the world a little bit, but a little bit underground. Mostly comics was something that I've always been really interested in. But like pretty much every other just watercolor painting I've done, or I played in bands before, and I've written songs within the world of my imagination. I don't know if I told my bandmates at the time, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I think that there was a certain point where I was like, oh, like I've been doing this for a while now without kind of really realizing it. I think that I kind of built myself a sandbox where I could kind of tell any kind of story that I would want to tell. Like, Bronze Age Conan style sword and sorcery stuff can coexist with, multi-dimensional alien corporations making, millennia long soap operas and other planes of reality. They all kind of, it's all fine, so it's just been a place. And I think because of that, like it does really lend itself to a unique world for role playing. I mean, yeah, like I'm excited about like going further out of the Painted Wastelands because there's more. There are more locales to explore as well. But we start here.
What I ended up doing is sitting down and just reading all of the comics, sitting down, going through his Instagram posts where he would like write like a little blurb about what he was posting. And and he has a series Bible for a television series that doesn't exist, only exists in the world. He's got like all these notes together, and he kind of like handed them to me, and then I tried to digest them as much as I could. He gave me like book recommendations, and I tried to absorb them into my brain as much as I could to really get into the vibe, and then trying to find as many ways that I can insert little touches so that like you don't find like a bracelet or a ring or something like that. The treasure that you find might be merch for a TV show like Legends of the Golden Child. And the desert weirdos love stuff like that. They love merch. They don't really care about gold bracelets and stuff. So that's how I ended up absorbing as much as I could. And I read all the comic books of Mr. Unpronounceable, who's hilarious.
So you targeted old school essentials as far as a system for this. You've had works for other games as well, right? Like you've done 5e stuff and other things like that. What made you target OSE or old school games in particular, rather than say any other of the systems that are out there that would probably fit a genre like this?
Yes. So I have written 5th edition stuff, and I think 5th edition is fine. I'm not so hung up on like rule systems. I believe sort of like in role playing in the platonic sense that we're just going to play D&D, the ideal version of it. What rules may exist aren't so important to me. I'm not much of a rules guy. And what I find is that 5th edition likes things that are a little bit more like Baldur's Gate, like that style, that vibe. And this is not like Baldur's Gate. This is not like Forgotten Realms. This is a little bit more out there, a little bit stranger. Old school RPGs, they seem, people who play those games really seem to enjoy the strangeness. They like Ultraviolet Grasslands is something that this gets compared to a lot because the art style, because the vibe. I actually have read through Ultraviolet Grasslands when it kind of first came out. And then as I was working on this project, I purposely said to myself, I'm not going to read any of it. I don't want any of it to necessarily like bleed into, accidentally. I want only Tim's things to bleed into this. So old school RPG players, I think, like weird stuff. Dungeon Crawl Classics likes weird stuff. And what pushed me towards OSE, Old School Essentials, is that I wanted something that other people could do the same thing that I do, which is just play the platonic ideal, a lingua franca of RPG, just a simple rule set we're all familiar with. I don't have to think that hard about it. You don't have to think that hard about it. And we're just rolling some dice and we're riding jet bikes through a pastel colored desert. And this guy over here is selling us fried lizard meat. And, just that sort of thing.
Pockets full of Saints mummified fingers we've got from vending machines.
Yes, vending machines that
ruined on the
sitting
horizon.
here in the desert. So OSE, I think, lends itself to that. I did Ziggurat of the Blood God, and I wrote it for Dungeon Crawl Classics, Old School Essentials, and Morkborg. And I started with DCC first. Have you played Dungeon Crawl Classics before?
Yep.
So I love DCC. The writing spells for DCC is really hard. Like writing one spell for DCC is the equivalent of writing like 10 spells for anything else. Because you have to go through every option and sometimes you're saying, like, how do I make this spell more powerful than it is? So it's kind of a struggle there. So that's what pushed me away from DCC was I wanted to have a spellcaster that was a dream spellcaster, the Oneiromancer. So that pushed me away from DCC. What I liked about OSE is that it's something that could be easily converted. It wouldn't be that difficult to convert the monsters to 5th edition or to Morkborg or something like that, having written for all three. And then our plan for the Kickstarter is, as stretch goals, people asked for like a booklet for converting. And so as stretch goals, we're going to have these conversion booklets that you could download electronically that give the monsters new stats for different rule sets.
So you said that this is, correct me if I'm wrong, was it 25 or 35 hexes in a small corner area of a much larger world. Is there a tone or a cohesive vibe that's specific to that area that made you choose like the desert area, which is what I'm assuming based off the art I've seen and what you were just saying a moment ago is the focus of those 25 hexes? Or what made you pick that particular region of the wider world?
I think we settled on it after discussing the different places because it was relatively unthought of. Tim had spent some time there thinking about it, working on it, but mostly it was like a little bit of a blank slate.
Yeah, like, so the world very roughly sketched out and is made up of the upper and lower. If I may, I'll give you the very brief kind of way of view.
Fill your boots.
So it's the upper and lower ethereal hierarchy. That's what it's kind of known as collectively, as a sort of series of dimensions, I suppose, that sort of butt up against each other. And the lower is where we are. The upper is a lot more kind of, I suppose, sci-fi, like space opera-y. Whereas the lower is a lot more, I suppose, like fantasy, like low tech, more kind of forgotten kind of tech and sort of rusting pipes rather than hyperdimensional, cube drives or whatever. So the lower ethereal hierarchy, it's there's an eternal city that stands on the coast called the City of the Ever Open Eye. A long time ago, it was run by a series of creatures called the Silent Monks. Now a new empire is in ascendance called the Cult of the Sect of the Bleeding Eye. Their influence permeates across the Endless Plain, which is to the back of the ocean. Across the ocean, the 100-Year Ocean. There's an archipelago called the 100-Year Coast, and that's my tropical kind of paradise, jungle,
Sexy ladies reading books by the beach.
yeah, smoking ectoplasm, exploring ruins over there. There's beyond that, there's the lands of dust, and there's more ancient necromancy and all kinds of stuff we're going to explore. At the other side of the ocean, back to where we were at the other end of the endless plain, is the Painted Wastelands. So it's way out in the sticks. It's butting up against an area called the Teeming Edge, which is just sort of the edge of, I suppose, my imagination, really.
Where it's all falling apart.
Maybe it'll go further. It's like the nothing and the never ending
Where the
story.
simulation ends.
Exactly. But so things break down there anyway in a sort of cohesive reality way, even more than they do usually everywhere else. But also due to some sort of catastrophic magical war that happened way back in the past. Like it's muddy. Time and space is a little bit shifty and strange. And people come out there to escape whatever, and they come there to find weird stuff from olden times. It's it's a little bit more relaxed out there. The Bleeding Eye cult hasn't quite dominated that area yet, as they may do other areas.
So he tells you all that, and all you can think about is like, oh my gosh, like I want to go to this place. I want to go to the lands of dust, or I want to, find out what about this gigantic, endless city that you could wander around forever. We ended up picking the Painted Wastelands simply because of that feeling of being on the edge of civilization. We have talked about all those other areas he just discussed, and like the idea of there being a book about the endless plain and what's in there, and the lands of dust. We're really excited to explore this land of necromancers, and like ancient civilizations that are rotting away into dust and full of ghouls. And then the 100-Year Ocean having like a real odyssey across this ocean that literally takes 100 years to get across, no matter how fast you're going, speedboat, raft, cruise ship, but drowning takes 100 years and you wash up on the other edge. So, yeah.
So how big are you expecting this book to be? Because if it's 35 hexes, are we thinking like is this a 60-page book, or is it a much larger than that book? Is this like a 300-page book?
This book is 140 some odd pages.
Okay. So you have a 145-page hex crawl / gazetteer / almost. There has to be quite a bit of lore going on here, because as I'm listening to the two of you who are incredibly invested into this, and like you were saying, as I'm hearing him describe this, I'm like, this is really cool. The problem I would have coming in is that I don't have that background knowledge. I haven't been in the world before. So I've always found that certain game types, sci-fi games, horror, cyberpunk games, it's sometimes hard to get players invested in them because they don't have that same shared mental image of what the world is to what the person who's running the game does.
Yes.
So how do you bridge that gap to get folks into what sounds like a really cool, different and unique twist on things, but they're not going to have the same background. They may have not gone through all the comics and what have you to background it. How do you catch them up to get them onto the right vibe for all this?
I understand exactly what you're talking about, because what you're describing is called resonance. Does this resonate with you? It's why I started with the ancient Greek adventures, because I was like deep into the mythology, and some of it's very esoteric and most people don't know it, but at least everybody has something about ancient Greece. At least everybody learned about it in school or watched Clash of the Titans, so they've got something. This world is not so alien to be in so esoteric. It has a lot of the vibes of things that role players would be familiar with, like H.P. Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith. But one of the things that I'm very careful about as I write this is making sure that the lore is fed to you in a way that feels like it makes sense. So you're usually interacting with the lore in the way of like objects, items, treasure, interacting with the people, and them talking to you. Another thing is that you want to sort of share some of these ideas with your players without being like, okay, sidebar. So this is a guy who's part of the the bleeding eye sect. Let me explain to you what that means. So instead, one of the very first encounters, you wash up on this strange land. You're coughing up all this dust. You're dizzy. You're like, what just happened? You just washed up here. So you make a normal character, elf, dwarf, whatever, and you just wash up here. And one of the first encounters, you fight a monster and discover this skull that's screaming for help. And the skull talks to you. It's called a painted skull. We have this beautiful painting of a skull with these glowy eyes. And he is your sidekick. He is your guide. He tells you everything you want to know, with painted skull comments that are in the book. They're shaped like the skull, and they have their little comment written in them. Our layout artist designed them to look like his silhouette. Okay, so he gives you advice. Well, let me find like a really good one. Here we go. So when you're in the concert, when you're down in the concert, right, the painted skull peeps up and says, hey, so Squelching Mollusk covers silent monk songs. The real band is busy performing the theme song from Hasteron's Dilemma, where they are performing the theme for all eternity in a bubble of space-time. And, oh, by the rotten cavities of the crawling tooth, check her out. No, not her. The green scaly one. Is she looking at me? Oh, what I wouldn't give for her to wear me like a helmet. That's what he talks like. He's full of like stupid jokes like that, and he's kind of a comedic relief, but he also is your opportunity to act out the world. And if the players are like, what is this? Why is this like this? Maybe the painted skull could give them a piece of advice.
And maybe it's not always actually a terrible thing, I think, within this world for characters to be going, what the hell is going on here anyway? And the painted skull isn't perfect either. He's sometimes unreliable, I think.
Yes, he is nothing more than just a talking bone.
He's lived there for a while. He's forgotten. He thinks he may have once been a powerful sorcerer. Who knows? That kind of thing.
So Chris and I, right before Tim, you joined onto the call, we were chatting a little bit about how you're down in Australia, I'm in Canada, Chris is in the States, and we were talking about time differences and how Chris made a great comment about how there must always be at least one overseeing the world while the other one sleeps. But what's the work process like? So it's right now it's early morning for you, Tim.
Uh-huh.
How would this normally work for you? You'd get up.
I'd normally be asleep right now. I tend to stay up pretty late, till 2 or 3, working. Which I don't even know if that's conducive to the time difference between me and Chris. We tend to say, well, I'm signing off now if I've got something to show him. If Chris is signing off, I'll often say, you'll see this in the morning, and vice versa. It's changed a bit, like from when we first started. Most of the writing's done now. I think Chris is just editing it. A lot of the artwork is done. There's still a lot to go, but I'm just hacking away. Like at the moment, I just came back from overseas, so I sort of took a 3-week break right at a sort of critical time, which I thought was the holiday was booked way before I even met Chris, so it had to happen. It was good, actually. It was really rejuvenating to not even do any work for 3 weeks. First time I think in my life. I haven't drawn for that long. But I've come back, and Chris is like, these are the priorities for you to do, like stretch goal stuff and rah. So I'm doing them. Once that's over, I'll just go back and have a look at the writing. There's lots of blank spaces for me to fill in and to illustrate.
When we were, because we do have a different time schedule, because he's in Australia and I'm in America. And so usually the way it works is that when in the evening time is when I'm done teaching for the day, Tim is usually waking up And usually as I'm going to bed is about the time when he's like getting ready to start drawing and he's awake and caffeinated and he's ready to go. So we sometimes will have like late night chat. There were some times where we would stay up very late. I would stay up very late to like 11 o'clock at night, which is late for me, and talking to him, either brainstorming or reading through the book. And then sometimes I call him on my way home from game night. So we'll have game night on Monday nights, my friends, and then we'll do brainstorming sessions then. Then because the prophecy states that one of us must guard over the planet at all times, I go to bed and he'll draw stuff. And then I get to wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh, wow, look at this. And there's all these cool drawings. And usually he's, just as I'm heading to work, he's now going to bed. And then I'll do stuff. I'll do writing. I'll do whatever it is I'm, promoting business stuff. And then I would send him pages like, this is the page that I wrote today. This is what I got done today. Because that helps to keep you motivated as a writer, that you're like, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for Tim. I owe it to him. So even though maybe I'm not feeling it today, I'm going to write a paragraph.
And
a paragraph won't write this whole book, but one paragraph is more than 0 paragraphs.
Yeah.
And
you really have
to so I can't just say nothing. Go ahead, Tim.
I feel like, just very, very early on, I realized that Chris had a very similar take on, the work in parentheses that I do, which is that really, you just keep going no matter how you're feeling. Sometimes keeping going is the thing that makes you feel good anyway. So it does. That's for me, a big serotonin release is just, getting up behind the mule, as Tom Waite says, and plowing. But very early, Chris was sending me pages and I'd be like, this is actually really good. And like, maybe this little thing needs to change because of like an obscure lore thing, but this is great. And, Chris, his credit as well, has been in no way pedantic about any of the art that I've done, which is good. Like, because I feel he's letting me really, just do my thing with the illustrations.
Tim be Tim. This was one of the big things that when we started doing this, as an artist, sometimes you'll draw something and then you'll draw it for the guy and he'll be like, can you make this a little bit more like this? And you're just like,
which is fine. And that's a thing, but I would be very annoyed if you were doing that to me with this project. And I'm glad.
And so with this project, when Tim draws something or makes something, it's the other way around. I'm not looking to be like, this should look a little bit more like this. I'm like, oh, that's what those guys look like. Let me change the description a little bit to match better.
Right. So I get exactly where you're coming from there. So it's less of the writer directing the artwork, and almost the artwork now is directing the writing. But there's obviously quite a bit of back and forth where the two of you are working together really closely on it.
Yeah.
This Kickstarter's planned to come out, is it like end of August or mid-August? Is that
August 1st?
August 1st?
You heard it here first.
All right. August 1st. So some of the best advice I've talked to tons of people here on the show that have gone through Kickstarters, successful and otherwise. The number one thing that I've always hear coming from almost all of them is make sure you have the vast bulk, like 99.99% of the work done before you ever even open the Kickstarter. So where would you say you guys are in the workflow process? What do you have left to button up? What makes the one that is awake and the one that is fitfully trying to get to sleep on the opposite end of the planet? What's powering you guys here as you're heading towards a month and a half away from the start of it?
So to make this project, I started my own publishing company, and one of my number one rules is that we will not go to Kickstarter unless the book is written, at least a first draft. But at this point, we're at more of the second or the third draft. I've gone through it. This is my third go through right now. So it's got to be written and like locked, like this is the book. Not like, oh, we'll add more chapters or maybe we'll do stretch goals. Nope, this is the book. The book is ready to go to the printer. The other thing is artwork. slows the projects down a lot, but Tim is a very quick artist. His turnaround time is ridiculous. He drew these tarot cards, and first he drew 5, and then I made some prototypes, and they felt very good, and I sent it to him because I sent them to him because I knew that as soon as he had them in his hands, he's like, we should make more. So we made like a whole 22 card deck of this deck of strange things. So he drew 22 cards. He'd already drawn 5, so 17 cards in about a week.
So Tim, he was nerd sniping you there, right? Like
Yeah.
He totally nerd sniped you.
I knew what he was doing. I knew what he was doing.
I'm real sneaky.
Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know, man. I don't know. I've got all this other work to do. But no, look, I feel like the only thing that I can control in my life is how much work I do. And it's usually a lot, like I work all day. Like I'm a full-time artist, and this is sort of what I have decided to spend my time on until it's done. This project, I feel like, I don't know, like it came along and was like in my mind exactly what I wanted to do. Like it's just, I couldn't have done it myself at all because of the technical side of things with the writing, making it a game and such. So I've already done a huge amount of the artwork already. I've just been doing that for months and months, and continue to do so.
So I have.
Sorry, after you.
Yeah, I have a more specific answer, which is that the book is written. Once it goes to Kickstarter and the Kickstarter is over, I'll send it to an editor, so they can to make sure that it's grammatically correct. I've already had proofreaders look through it, but this is like an actual paid editor. Then we have a layout artist who will lay out the book. Her name is Mina. They did the PDF, the free PDF. So that actually helped a lot because it helped us to get onto the same page of what we wanted. Got on the same page of what we wanted, because we went back and forth for quite a while where they sent me something and I said, yeah, this is not working. We need to do this instead. We need to change this. We got real millimeter eyes about it and really, really dialed everything in and I was sending them to Tim saying, like, what do you think? What do you like? What do you want? What could we change? And so we were able to really dial in that that's what the book will probably look like. That was several hours worth of work. So Mina will do the layout, and Tim, of course, will complete the artwork. The Kickstarter runs for 1 month in August, ends in September. It takes about 3 weeks for Kickstarter to send you the money. And then once they send us the money, it goes to, editor and layout, and Tim's doing artwork over the next 4 or 5 months. I feel very confident that Tim will be able to get all the artwork done in that time. Yeah, because he works very quickly. Like he churns this stuff out like nothing. It's crazy.
And it's easy for me too, because I'm again, there's nobody saying to me, oh, you need to change this. I'm like, no, I know exactly what I'm doing. Like,
that's right.
Which is the joy in it to me.
We designed the cover. We designed the limited edition cover. We designed the Dungeon Master screen, and the deck of many things. We sent all of that to a printer to get printed. They sent me copies. So once the layout is done, I just send it off to this printing company called Chin Publishing, and they're printing pretty much everything for me, all the books, the screen, the paper money. They're printing all these things for me, and then I ship it out.
So yeah, I was going to ask about that, because you've in the past you've done 3D printed models, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Kickstarters before, and the you've described a bunch of different parts there. I assume they're different pledge levels or
right.
stretch goals, what have you, whether it be the money, the cards, the screen, etc. Is that how much extra complexity does that add to running through the Kickstarter? And is this something you're going to have like a fulfillment company helping you out with, or is this going to be with you guys on opposite ends of the planet? Is it going to be like half of it comes to you, half of it comes to him, and then you guys stuff envelopes and mail it to your respective sides of the planet? Or what's the plan for that sort of a thing?
So the fulfillment plan, first there is a level of complexity to this, but this is, again, not the first Kickstarter I've ever been involved with. In the past, when I was working with Sharktopus Games, I was the creative one, and my buddy was the one stuffing envelopes and mailing everything out. So I learned a lot about the process. I learned a lot about like what works, what doesn't work. So an example is that most of these stretch goals, almost all stretch goals, are digital stretch goals. There are things that we will put into digital download for backers, and that way nobody's sitting around waiting for us to produce something and for it to get to them. I think Dolmen Wood was really good about that. I did the Dolmen Wood Kickstarter, and it was really nice to get an email saying, hey, we have something for you. And I'm like, oh, wow, thanks. That's awesome. So I want to recreate that feeling, and not the feeling of I've been waiting for 2 years for this.
Yeah, it's
object.
so it's crazy. It's crazy to me. Like I haven't ever done a Kickstarter before, so this is exciting and slightly terrifying. But it's wild to me that people would start this process and start a Kickstarter and not have done any of this work already. It's totally insane.
There's
People do that.
Well, because there's a difference between yes, to answer you, Tim, that there is many. Because Kickstarter, when it first started, was more of a, hey, I've got an idea for something I want to do. Help me out, raise some funds so that I can go and do it. And it's now morphed more into where it's almost like an early release thing. So it used to be, when Kickstarter was first started, it was meant to be like, hey, I want to try something, back me, be the Patreon and help me do this. And now it's more of, hey, I've got this cool product I'm going to do. I'm going to sell it. Here, let me gather all my audience first instead of you having to go to a store and finding it.
Right. Yeah.
So the current reality of Kickstarter, in my opinion, is that you have to have everything done now, because the expectation, there's no longer a, oh, well, I backed the guy, and if I don't ever get a product, oh, well, I was backing him or her to create something. Now it's more of, no, people don't look at it in that way. They look at, no, I bought Chris and Tim's book.
Yeah.
Where's it at?
As they should, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
it just depends on what the expectation is up front, right? And then with Kickstarter, it's shifted over time.
So the way this will work is that there are 3 pledge levels, because also one of the things I learned was to not make too many pledge levels and not make it too complicated. I think that we overcomplicated things for ourselves when we did Ziggurat the Blood God, and it was like multiple rule sets, and there was so many different pledge levels that made it really hard. And Kickstarter doesn't make it any easier with the way that they give you the data, which is another learning experience. So there's a digital one where you'll just get the digital things, the digital stretch goals, which is most of everything, because most everything's digital, like comics and music. And we talked the idea of a conversion booklet. That's going to be digital. I'm probably not going to print something.
One of these stretch goals is going to be like all of the comics I've ever done. So you were talking before about like having a window into that world. Like,
That's right. You can send that to share that with your friends. But again, that's a thing that already exists and is already done. And so the limited edition pledge level is the one that has like a lot of extras to it. Because I thought about, I want a gold foil black leather cover with gilded edges. And Chin Publishing sent me it, and it was so beautiful to touch it and watch the light dance across it. I was cackling like a crazy person. So I was looking at it. It was so beautiful. Then I thought to myself, well, what would be other things that I would want if I was running the game? We made the Dungeon Master screen, the referee screen. So that object is already laid out and done. I sent it off. They sent me the proof. I said, this looks great. The limited edition pledge level comes with a regular version of the book, because I didn't want you to have to choose. I couldn't choose between which one I wanted. I couldn't decide, do I want this gold foil one? Do I want the regular one? I said, you know what? I would technically want both, and one would sit on my shelf and be fancy. One would be the one that I look. So you'll get 2 books. It's fine. It comes with a pack of dice. I will say these are not custom special dice. I spent a lot of time looking into it, and it led to being something that would have created delays, like you were talking about. And so these are Chessex dice, but we went through the whole catalog. And I said, you like this one, Tim? No. This one? Nah. This one? Nah. This one? Ooh, okay. So we found the dice that are the ectoplasm dice. And then the final thing is the paper money. So I've long had the idea of giving players paper money as like a reward instead of like the actual metal coins, because handing people metal coins, the problem is those metal coins are expensive. They're expensive to make and get. And the challenge you run into is you'll never be able to buy enough unless you spend like real gold or something like that to actually like hand that over and feel good. So I've liked the idea of paper money. And in one of Tim's comics, there's a character called the synthetic sorcerer who is sitting in a cafe. He's eating food. His face is covered with worms. He's stuffing food into his worm mouth. And then he leaves behind on the table some money. And I'm like, zero in on this. And I'm like, what is that? That paper money? Ho, ho, ho. So that's when we had this whole discussion about the concept of paper money and paper money bills, which are called ectos in the world. So nothing is worth silver coins. Everything's worth ectos. If you back the big pledge level, you get a big stack of 250 ectos. It's monopoly money, really, but it's monopoly money designed by Tim. I actually just made a bunch of prototypes today, and I cut them out, and I was handing them out to people at summer school. Like my buddy teacher, I was like, "Hey, you've been working hard today. Here you go, man. Here's a tip."
I know that the audience can't see this, but I'll just hold up that. There's
the guy drinking his big gulp.
There's the money on the table. Like, oh, I can't even.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah, you got me. It was fun. That was the first project I did getting back from. I was just in Japan, and I was like, I had a very cash heavy vacation. It was my first time there, and so yeah, cash. I haven't used cash in years, and then spending all this time with cash and money and stuff. It was a really fun thing to do straight away when I came back.
Yeah.
For my worlds, which are typically more like traditional medieval fantasy type worlds where there are other coins, I get around it by heading down to the bulk store and picking up those gold foil chocolate coins.
Yeah.
And then when you spend them, you also get a nice treat. But I do like the Monopoly money. I think that is fantastic. The colors on it look really good. For those who are in Canada, if you've ever seen Canadian Tire money, it's very similar to that. If you guys, for the two of you, if you've never seen that, go look up Canadian Tire money. You'll get a giggle. It's a currency that was living here in Canada forever. But
so really quick, Jen, to circle finally back to kind of what you were asking about the Kickstarter process. Ultimately, the goal for me is what we need help with is the printing costs. The book exists. I need help with the layout cost because I want this to look good for you and look like something that's professional. And again, it's a 2-man team, and plus our hirelings that have joined us. But that's the main thing that people are paying for is the printing costs. It helps us to understand how many are we printing? How many people want them? And then also what I want to do is try to get it out there into the world in game stores and places like that. This is the way to get the game out there. So you're not paying for me to write it. I already did that. We would probably do this anyways if Kickstarter didn't exist. I would just take out a big loan on it or something and mortgage myself.
So Tim, whenever I look at the art that I've seen of the game thus far, and a lot of your art in general, I get a very Star Wars vibe. Okay. I look it over and I'm like, I can see this. Chris mentioned he likened you to Lucas earlier. And when I look, I know folks on the pod that are listening to the podcast can't see this, but when we look behind Chris, he's got Star Trek stuff everywhere. Yes. So Tim, I'm assuming there's a Star Wars reference in here, and you've handed it over to the Star Trek guy. How has the How is the mishmash between the two space franchises mixing, or has there been Trek influences that have come into these obviously Star Wars influenced art?
Mm-hmm.
Oh God,
I
I
haven't-
wouldn't know. Chris might be slipping all of that kind of stuff in without me knowing. I like Star Trek. I like Star Wars. When it comes to me, like I
That's
always
impossible,
like to
Tim.
sort of-
This is the internet. Nobody can like
Do we
both
have?
those things.
This is what you're
you
saying?
have,
I have to
yeah,
choose.
yeah. There has to
Okay.
be a chosen one here.
Fuck, because I like things about Star Trek. I like things about Star Wars. I don't know. Look, what I'm trying to say is I like to follow the Nile upriver, right? Like I don't when I'm looking at art and literature and cinema, you know, what influenced Star Wars? What influenced that? You know, what influenced that? Like when Chris was saying before, like, you know, I was like, you know, sending him books and things, stories, art that I had found inspirational in the past. Like the main one that I sent him, that I was surprised you hadn't read, I think was Clark Ashton Smith. You know, forget about Star Wars. Like, you know, it's great. That's sort of down the river a little bit too much. I want to go back and back and back and but you know, there's hover bikes
I do.
in Painted Wastelands.
Yes.
But I
I do
think
have
there's
an
hover
answer.
bikes in Star Trek as well. So, you know, what are we doing? What are we
And
doing?
the Star Wars influence is strong in the Star Wars fans because there's one area that you stumble across called the cargo cult. And it's a group of people who have built a shrine of television sets. And they're all glued in watching their favorite show, Hasteron's Dilemma, which is a science fiction medical drama that is incredibly old. There's tens of thousands of seasons. It's made by people who live in the upper ethereal, and it kind of leaks down into the lower. So these people have built a whole cult about it. They worship it. And you have to be careful that you don't look too closely at the TVs. You have to make a save. And if you fail, you're going to sit down and want to watch. You're going to get sucked in too. And then there's a chart of initial attitude, like how do the cultists feel about you? And like I started to think about like how would you react? I started thinking about the crazed Star Trek nerd, the crazed Star Wars nerd, who you start talking during my show and they just want to stab you. They're like, no talking, and they'll start stabbing you. Or if they like you and they're impressed by you, you can improve their attitude. They'll want to tell you all about it. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, they'll like force you to listen. And they'll want to just, and there's a whole chart of Hasteron's Dilemma explained by the cultists. And so the referee kind of can go down this list of all these insane lore bits being fed to the players by the cultists. Like,
and these are like plot points in an alien TV show. Like it's
yes.
This is when it comes to world building. Like for a long time, I've always been super excited about like the idea of like what kind of media. If you lived in a nightmare surrealist sort of dream dimension that was accessible to entities all throughout the multiverse and beyond, what kind of shows would you be watching on a Saturday morning? You know, like what are the posters
would they be
look like
watching?
on the walls? Like, you know, what do the toys look like, and how are they cursed? You know, and why? You know, and like it's all of that sort of background kind of clutter almost that sort of paints this picture of a lived in place with all of this history and incidental, like, you know, fictional history as well, and you know, which some people think is real.
So Kevin, this chart has 10 different sort of like Hasteron Dilemma plot points that the cultists can explain to you. And here's one that I think is suitable for you. My friends and I are transmitting a rewatch Ethercast where we watch every episode of Hasteron's Dilemma every hour of the day and live stream our reactions. It's called The Greatest Dilemma. Carve this symbol into your forehead to subscribe.
All right.
And you're just like, no thanks. Or you do it. Dude, grab a knife and let them carve into your forehead.
You can do that.
And then you can listen to their podcast. Beamed into your brain.
We're coming up onto the end. you mentioned shows that in the fictional world people may have watched on a Saturday morning. I want to kind of wrap up with bringing it back to the real world, and we're all in different parts of the world. And looking at us here, we're all probably roughly the same age, within a couple of years of each other. What is your Saturday morning cartoon from your childhood that you are nostalgia as anything about, that maybe has absolutely nothing to do with this, but what is your I'm going to my grave and saying this is the greatest Saturday morning cartoon ever?
Yes.
Tim looks like he's thinking. I'm going to go to Chris first.
Okay. So this is such a funny thing because we've had many conversations about cartoons like Captain Planet, and Tim quoted Captain Planet. And I said, "You watch Captain Planet?" He's like, "Yeah, dude, we've watched Captain Planet." I'm like, "They had Captain Planet in New Zealand?" And he's like, Your monoculture in America has bled into everyone. Everything you watched, I watched." I'm like, okay, I didn't know. My favorite is Ninja Turtles. I love the Ninja Turtles. I love the Ninja Turtles today.
Follow-up question. Follow-up question then that has to be done. Who's the greatest Ninja Turtle?
Michelangelo.
Oh,
he's a party dude.
Yeah, I disagree.
Okay, so hear me out. My mom's best friend, who was my aunt Randy, she dated one of the Ninja Turtles. She dated the actor. She had she was a hairdresser in Hollywood, and so she dated the actor, the martial artist gymnast who played Michelangelo.
In the 90s,
in the first movie.
action?
Yeah,
Nice.
in the first movie. You can see him in some of like the behind the scenes stuff when he has the costume off. So I love Michelangelo. He's a party dude. Everyone else is cool but rude. But I love Michelangelo. He's the best.
All right, Tim, down in New Zealand, where you get all the exact same shows that everybody up in America and by extension Canada gets. What was your favorite Saturday morning cartoon?
Well, just before I answer that, what you said before, Chris, made me laugh. Like I think that America is a country that is quite inward looking and is surprised that it has. It's like, it always blows my mind that Americans are like, oh wow, okay, you guys have got hamburgers. Yeah. You guys have got democracy. But I was in Japan just recently again, and my son had a Super Mario hat, and so many Japanese people were like, "Whoa, do you know about Mario?" And it was just like, "Yeah, we do." Like it was crazy. Anyway, for me, I'm gonna go a little bit obscure. Like there was a show that I didn't even think was real, or that kind of lost childhood media, like way back, like. So for me, and it is real, and I've researched it and gone, oh shit, it was this, and looked at it and gone, the theme song makes me feel those feelings, but I don't know if I would watch this again. But when I was a kid, it was a show called Mysterious Cities of Gold. It's like an anime it's like an anime. This is like 1985 or 6, and it was about like a young kid. He had a flying golden eagle flying around, South America during the Inca period, I believe. But that's that theme song. When I first discovered that I wasn't just dreaming, this show was like, whoa, that feeling.
Yes.
So I think it's always going to be that. For maybe a different way. Like I don't watch it all the time. Like Chris watches Ninja Turtles.
I do watch Ninja Turtles all the time.
Old Ninja Turtles is good. Is good stuff.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it'd be high on my list. But I'd have to say, for me, because I haven't answered this on the show before either. It just kind of came to me as I was chatting with each of them. It's more from like my teen times than my childhood, but I'm going to go with like Batman the Animated Series.
Yes,
because I can't think of any other one that sticks with me that I would watch for reasons other than nostalgia. Like if I'm going to watch 80s Turtles, it's probably purely for nostalgia. I will still go back and watch Batman the Animated Series just because it's good TV now.
It is. Yeah, totally.
Where can people find you guys? Where is your work posted, and where can they stay up to date to find out information for when the Kickstarter does launch on August 1st? Where can they get all the information, and is there a way to pre-sign up for anything like that?
Yes. So there is a Kickstarter pre-launch page, and I'll share that with you, and I assume you'll share that in the show notes, that you can follow so that you can receive an email as soon as it's ready. Also, there's a Painted Wastelands Facebook group. You just look up the Painted Wastelands on Facebook. And usually I post all of our previews and our little our piece of artwork. I'm going to post pictures of the ectos on there of me rolling around in money and dancing with it. And then Tim also has an Instagram that you need to dig deeply through.
Yeah, I would definitely, if people are interested in this, like, you know, that would be a good place to get a even broader flavor of what's going on. I'm always posting something, sometimes sneakily stuff that Chris hasn't posted as well. That's Tim Molloy Art, one word at Instagram, whatever that is. But hopefully you can share that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, I'll put all the links into the show notes, and people can follow there. Gentlemen, I hope this works out to be a massive success for you. The artwork and the obvious enthusiasm between the two of you as you're chatting back and forth is very. I hope it has the impact on the listeners it has on me, where it's like, oh, these guys are so into this. I need to learn more about it. So the enthusiasm is very obvious, very genuine, and the artwork is fantastic, Tim. And while I've only seen the preview PDF. The game write-ups before we even got on the air, I saw things like the ecto dollars, and I was like, oh, I want to know more about that. And you're like, oh, I've got them physically here. I'm like, oh, this is great. So yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. I hope everybody can jump on and pre-register for it, so they're able to jump into it and support it as soon as it launches here in August.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right, folks, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Red Caps Podcast. I hope you enjoyed, you learned something, and that you are eager to come back for more. www.theredcaps.net has all the links to all the ways to contact me, and I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for listening. And remember, never let your caps dry out. Stay safe. Have fun. We'll talk again soon. Take care.